to this first in a series on talent management presented by Silversoft. We're going to be looking at talent management quite holistically this year. So we'll have a few more in this series covering obviously ROI today, but in future ones we'll be doing best practices as well as looking at different technology platforms for talent management. Some exciting news: in April we're publishing Talent Management for Dummies. Not that we are calling any of our clients that, but this is quite a useful series that Deltek's been doing on various aspects of the talent, of the management software that they offer, and we're going to be unpacking elements from that booklet in some future webinars. So that's something that we're looking forward to, and we might also have some copies of those books available for you as well. Okay, just some general housekeeping before we kick off, because there's quite a lot to get through today. This session is being recorded, so if you want to download it afterwards, please contact the presenter and she'll make that available to you on download. We're quite happy for you to type in some questions as we go. You can type them in on the box available on chat. It will come through to us. We're not going to answer them immediately, but there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, and we'll cover any of your questions raised at that stage. Just also one last thing, we're having a breakfast roadshow in March that are all around the country. Cape Town's on the 15th, Durban we're doing on the 16th, and Johannesburg on the 17th. It's also to showcase talent management. If you're interested in that, again, please contact the presenter today via email and we'll send you an invitation. So before I introduce our speaker today, just some background on Silversoft. Silversoft is a South African company that sells and supports the Deltek range of software solutions. Been doing that for just over 10 years, and the most recent addition is the talent management software formerly known as HR Smart. Today's presentation is going to be from Kathryn Gordon. Kathryn's the sales manager at Silversoft. She's got over 10 years experience in talent management and various elements thereof, both selling and consulting to clients. So without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Kathryn.
Thank you, Nick, and good morning, everyone. It's quite scary that it's almost the end of February and the beginning of March, and one quarter of the year has gone already. As Nick has mentioned, we're going to be focusing today on the return on investment with talent management. I know many people look at talent management as being this puzzle, looking at it with quite anxiety, not knowing how to start it and where to begin. So what we're going to be looking at in terms of this webinar and the agenda is unpacking what is talent management in 2016, because there were definitely old methodologies, different theories, and now there seems to be a new one that has been gaining popularity. So we're going to unpack exactly what that methodology is. It's like everyone that knows me knows I love building puzzles, and the key thing in building a big 100-piece puzzle is you've got to get the framework right, and that is what talent management methodology is. We need to understand what our parameters are, exactly what we need to do so that we can actually put our processes in place. Unpacking that, we also need to look at the common challenges that are facing us and globally. And then what are the imperatives? So what are the do's? What are the things that we do need to put in place for ourselves and for the organization for 2016? Once we've got the broad framework, we're then going to look at the various processes involved in talent management. So that is your acquisition, performance, learning, development, and succession planning, and looking at what are the ROIs of those individual elements that form part of talent management. And then the glue that brings all of it together is your talent analytics. So what if we have a talent management process in place? Can we draw from it? What are the analytics? What are the return on investments? As Nick mentioned, we will have a Q&A session. So at any point in time, if you want to raise questions, that is the time that I will go through and I will answer it. So what is talent management? If we look at the generations that are facing us today and the people that are coming into our marketplace, it's the millennials. And we in HR are facing a completely different challenge to what our counterparts did 5-6 years ago, in the sense that the employees today, they're not just looking for a career. what they're looking for is an experience. They are wanting interactive. They are wanting the technology available. They are wanting a conversation with the managers. They're wanting that they're understanding I spent so many hours at work, I need to enjoy that. And with the influx of the millennial generation, they're the ones that will say, well, if I don't enjoy it, if there's no career aspiration for me, well, then I'm going to leave and I'm going to go where there is an aspiration for me. So what is it that we need to change? If we know what we've been doing, we will then know what we need to change. And traditionally, we have done all the components of talent management, but we've done it in silos. So we've done workforce planning. We've done learning and development. We've got an expert in place and also helps out with our workplace skills plan report. We've got a recruiting team in place that the moment there's a vacancy, they can go and hire. We've got a performance management person in place and we've got a process in place. Often we might even have a whole leadership development program which leads to succession planning, and we're constantly on top of compensation. But what happens is, because we were dealing with these in silos and not really talking to one another, it led to some complications, some things that business is now saying is problematic. And one of that is the slow response to changing needs. Basically, it leads to an inability to identify our current and our future talent gaps. Hiring strategy and development plans we find are not in sync. And ultimately, there's no clear picture of future talent profiles, which then leads to the leadership pipeline being in jeopardy. How often have we found that recruitment is on one side of the business and everything else is on the other side? And if recruitment is not hiring the right people to lead that leadership grid and to feed the skill set of the business in order for them to achieve their goals, then is the right talent coming into our business? The second element is that when we dealt with silos, we found that it led to disconnected decision making. In other words, your data and your processes were not integrated. Talent is not shared across the business units, and ultimately there's no visibility into your talent gaps. We also found that it led us to be not responsive to employee demands. Currently, your employees are wanting career development. They're wanting those defined career paths. They're wanting mobility. But without understanding what the employees have and potentially relying quite heavily on managers who often are the weak link in the organization performance. They don't want to do performance management. And we rely very heavily on performance management to know what the employee's skill set is. So we may have to look outside of that to understand our employees. And lastly, we all understand this and know this. Administratively, it is very intensive. We find the data entry is repetitive. We put a job ad in for recruitment. We put KPIs in for performance. We put training requirements in for learning. All three different aspects of the job profile, but in three different locations, which then makes it very hard to plan for the future, as it's difficult to obtain executive level talent information. So what had happened is, traditionally people said, well, you can't work in silos, so you now have to become integrated. And they started, either through a system or through processes, integrating all of these silos. But to what end? What do we integrate? What information needs to talk to what information? And ultimately what happened is it became very complicated. And talent management just became that word that we talk about. It just became almost impossible to execute. So my friends at Burson, who I love and I think their research is fantastic, so I've taken a snippet out of their research. They had come across a new methodology and it's working. And that methodology is, the first thing that you need to do is look at the business. So what are the business plans? What is the short term, the midterm, and the long-term plans of the business? What are their challenges? And especially now in South Africa, when our exchange rate is going up and down like a yo-yo, we don't know what's happening in the economic climate. there is risk. The business now needs to shift. It might need to increase its efforts in certain areas, pull back in other areas. So that is what we need to know. We in HR need to be sitting with the executives and understanding where they're taking the business. Because once we understand that, we then know what each business unit is required to do. And each business unit is made up of talent. We then need to look at that talent. Do we have the right people in the organization to take the business to the next level? If not, can we develop them? If we can't develop them, is the skill set existing in the marketplace? Where is it existing in the marketplace so that we can create now a solution strategy to gain this talent into the business? That then leads to our HR processes. That leads to having to do performance management, making sure that the people are performing that we're wanting to keep, making sure that we're recruiting different types of talent sets, making sure that we are compensating the key people in our organization who are going to take us to that next level, and we can't afford to lose them. And the last step is taking all of our HR processes, combining them, redesigning them, and to form one talent management strategy. Where we are sitting at the moment is many clients are saying we've got to now have a system that takes all of those silos and literally pushes them together and creates one funnel, which is then called the talent management funnel. If we look at the challenges, and I, as Nick has mentioned, been in the market for more than 10 years, and these never fail. This is always the challenges that we're facing, whether you're a global company, whether you're a small man company, these are the same challenges. The first one is we are losing our employees to competitors in our industry. We hire the right talent, we train them up properly, and then we lose them. And now we sit. The second one is we have trouble pulling reports related to compliance. We have trouble pulling workplace skills plan reports. We have trouble pulling employment equity reports. We don't know in terms of the recruitment process, for example, how many of which race and gender we recruited and shortlisted for particular positions. We want to have better insights into our candidate pipeline so that we can see on our database, do we have the skill sets to recruit from to be able to reach the business goal. We also find we're spending too much time reviewing resumes of unqualified candidates. That's self-explanatory. We're finding that our paper-based appraisal process is cumbersome and is low usage adoption. People take performance and literally it's a case of, okay, fine, it's now review time. Quickly give me that Excel spreadsheet. Tick, 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 tick. 9 times it's 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. And we're finished until the next year. They also find from a training perspective that companies are having trouble tracking the training for internal employees. You know, when it comes to having to do the workplace skills plan report, it's literally a mad scramble to understand what training was actually achieved. We know what we planned for, but what has been achieved? And then we've got to try and go through all our records because we don't have a central place or a point in which I can look at an individual and say, right, that is what you've done. And then lastly, they also have trouble tracking certifications and when these qualifications or certifications are actually expiring. So knowing this methodology and this framework and knowing the challenges that we face, what is it that we need to start putting into place in 2016? And you know what, we can't put it all into place, but we can do some of it. So what are our imperatives? The first one is we've got to start in the beginning. We have to look at improving the speed and the quality of hire. An empty chair in an office costs the business money. At the same time, we can't just quickly hire the wrong person because that costs the business probably even more money. So we have to look at how do we make our recruitment process even more efficient, but within a shorter period of time. We've got to assess and improve the corporate culture. Know what your company is. Know what their value system is. Know what the mission is of the business. Know where they're wanting to go in because you've got to hire people into that culture. If you hire the skill set and they're fantastic, but they don't marry the culture, you will lose them. They will either walk out or you'll end up having quite a big argument. You've got to be able to deliver and manage your employment brand. It is crucial because this will lead to the right talent applying for your positions. For example, I know right now that there are very qualified executives that will think twice before applying for a mining position within a mining term because they see what's happening in the marketplace. It is very important that in social media you portray yourself as this employer of choice. Once you've got that, you need to plan and analyze your talent. You need to know, who do I have in the organization and what do I want to do with them in the organization? And when I talk about talent, I'm actually talking about your employee, because that is your talent. Then you need to look at improving their career and their talent mobility. Where do they want to go in the business? They've joined potentially as a business analyst. Do they want to go to other elements of the business? Where is it? Because if I can provide that road for them, they're going to stay with me. Then you've also got to look at improving management and leadership. The culture automatically stems from your leadership. You've got to get your management on board that they are managing people. They are managing their talent. They can't just rely and throw it back into HR, because we are not listed, to put it badly, but on the firing line. They are with their staff. They know their staff very well. And another side is the corridor talk. You know, I've often gone to clients and I've heard the leader saying, oh my goodness, have you seen the exchange rate? And what that tends to leave with their employees is a negative feeling of, well, if my leader is worried about the exchange rate, does that mean it's going to have an impact on the business? If it's going to have an impact on the business, is my job safe? And then security starts playing ball. And it was literally just corridor talk. We then, together with everything else, need to drive performance, and you've got to link it to development. It's no point in just assessing a person's performance if you're not looking at improving that performance and providing them with the tools, the training that they need to develop. And ultimately, all of this will help us to accelerate the time to competency. Not only can we hire someone quickly, but because we are engaging with them, because we know what their strengths and weaknesses are, because we're doing performance and we're developing them, we are getting them up to speed so much quicker. All of this collectively ensures that we can drive engagement and retention. And that is exactly where we need to be. We need to be in a position where we can drive that engagement and that retention. So let's sort of take a step back from looking at talent management holistically, and let's look at looking at it individually. So what is the most important part? It's talent acquisition. It's the first step. And why do I say that? Because your great people, the right people, they're the foundation of your business. You need to attract and you need to hire the right talent. So how do we do that? Apologies for that. How do we do that? So the first thing is, what we found is that there's 53% of hiring managers say it's difficult to find and retain millennial employees. So I'll get back to why that is such a difficult thing. Let's first unpack what the top practices are. What do we need to do in recruitment to make sure that we can develop and give a return on investment? So the first thing is we've got to start working on the hiring manager relationships. Don't just rely on a job spec, because a job spec is generally very generic. We've got to speak to the hiring managers and say, what is it that is going to make this person the most successful? What do you need in your department right now? I know the basic skill set, but what over and above that do you require? You need to start developing a candidate pool. That is very, very important, because we'll then be able to see the skills gap that we have. Millennials, 53% of hiring managers say it's difficult to find and retain millennials. Why? Because they are looking on social media. We have to get into the social media space, the Twitters, the LinkedIn, the Facebooks. You've got to start creating an employer brand. We also need to look at training our recruiters. So often I'm finding that we will put more of an admin administrative type person into the role. We don't train them up because we believe that recruiting is more administrative intensive. It's actually not. It is quite a unique skill set, and we need to train them on how to effectively screen candidates, on how to write job ads, on how to actually be able to interview to get the right information out of a potential candidate or a potential employee. We need to look at governance and decision making. So during the recruitment process, who's going to accept the offer before we send it to the candidate? Do we advertise internally first and then externally? It's quite cumbersome when those decisions and governance have not been put in place and we're halfway through a recruitment process and we have to stop. We could lose a potential candidate because we've wasted a week internally trying to decide on certain things. Employer referral program. This has always been a bone of contention. Some people have been worried about the aunties and the uncles and the sisters and the brothers being referred. But ultimately, the statistics are pointing in favor of an employee referral program because your employer knows your corporate culture. It's their name. So they will not refer people to you that are not going to be the perfect fit. And they've worked in similar industries, similar job roles. So they come with knowledge. They come with people. And they've actually proven that to use someone and to get someone from an employee referral program has increased the retention of that person and their performance in the first 6 months by as much as 66%. So your quality of hire goes up. You need to start looking at putting in technology in place for talent acquisition because this will optimize how you do recruitment and it will also lead to an employment branding. If I go onto your website, I see there's a careers link and I can see your jobs that are being advertised, wow, you're on the cutting edge. You're the company I want to work for versus if you're interested, please go and apply to www or careers at, because then I'm a little bit nervous because everything is going to the old channel again. We also need to assess against the requirements of the job, not what it would be nice to have, and this person didn't interview that well, but do they have the skill set? Do they have what the hiring manager wants and the job requires? And then ultimately, we need to look at reporting and analytics. So are we advertising in the right spaces? How long has it taken to hire? What is the cost of hire? So that if we put all of this in place, the ROI that we can receive from recruitment is the reports that they will now create insight into which channels are most cost effective. If I'm advertising in newspapers, which ones are working for me? And this will then enable us as recruiters to invest in only the sources where results are achieved. It also will help us to reduce the time to hire if we put in best practices and ultimately a system of talent management, because it will help us to manage internal and external talent pools. It will also help us to engage with our current employees, use the talent profiles, and actually benchmark them and see where did we get these people, where did we advertise them, because that's the channels that we need to be in. And ultimately, the time is saved on focusing on more qualified applicants because now we've got pre-screening questionnaires, we've got assessments in place, we've got background checks and reference checks, we've got our process in place. We've got a client that's actually used one of our tools and they fed back to us with, in fact, actual statistics. And they said that there was an 83% reduction in the time required to post new positions, 75% increase in qualified candidates per open position, and there was a 50% increase in hiring manager satisfaction based on the quality of CVs submitted, purely because they had 3 candidates and they couldn't choose which one to hire. So that is recruitment. The next element, which to me is the key to retention, is performance management, because companies and people always perform better when their goals are aligned. When I know what's expected from me, I'm going to perform better. And not only that, but if it's measured and if success is rewarded. So if I do better than the next person, I expect to be rewarded better than the next person. So let's unpack performance. We know that only 8% of organizations believe that their performance management process is worth the time they're putting into it. So now we have to look at best practices for performance. And one of those elements is you've got to clarify upfront the purpose of performance management. Why are you doing it? And explain this to the managers and the employees. It's not a case of just checking a box. It's not a case of making sure you're doing your job properly. It's making sure that you have the tools and everything at your disposal to be the best at your job. If you don't, we will then link that to a development process. And coach and develop throughout the year. Not at the end once the person's got a poor rating, but all through the year. And encourage regular dialogue between the manager and the employee. Maybe even look at creating a performance diary where they can make notes of good and bad. And it's important to align the individual goals with the business goals and look at automating the performance process, because this will encourage objectivity. If you can clearly see that diary online, if you can see my performance contract all through the year, it just portrays that visibility. And be important is to link the process to development succession planning initiatives. Don't do performance on its own, because if we link it, we can explain why specific people will get advanced, once again leading to objectivity. What's the ROI of performance? What we can do is we can seamlessly align our talent programs with measurable business goals. In turn, this will help you to measure the impact of the employee. Who is having an impact? Who is not having an impact? The investment that I'm putting in them, am I getting it out? Am I seeing their performance being improved? Skills and competencies are probably the pillars of everything. And it's important that we include that in the performance review. So not only do we assess goals, but we also look at their skills. We look at their competencies. So we assess them as a unified evaluation. If we are looking at a system, it is very important that a system that you have in place or a process is customizable. That whatever workflow it is, it can be configured to fit your existing performance process, because what you're doing is probably exactly right. It just maybe is a bit cumbersome, or it's maybe a bit tedious. But if you have to change what you're doing, the change management that will take place could equate to an extra year extension on your timelines. And lastly, it is also nice to actually link bonus payouts, annual salary reviews directly to performance evaluations. So if the performance evaluations are being done objectively and there's a thorough review process in place, why not click a button and say, right, this person's achieved 4 out of 5, therefore that equates to that percentage increase. Why can't we make it as simple as that? We had the same client that did performance online. They also fed back some different statistics for us, and they found that 60% of time was reduced in the preparation for an employee evaluation. They also found that there was a 75% reduction in the amount of time required to conduct the employee evaluation, and there was a 78% improvement in departmental compliance in meeting the evaluation deadlines. It had a definite ROI after 2 years. So now, what is the glue between performance and recruitment and everything else? And that is your learning. Learning is a way for us to build a supply chain of needs. It can never be done in isolation. And one of the things that Dr. Edward Scannell said was retention is best when the learner is involved. We now have different generations that are in the workplace, the latest one being the millennial. The way they learn, what they expect is so much different to what we did 15, 20 years ago. So now we have to look at innovative ways, different ways to not only engage, but to teach the employees that we have. And we found that if we do this engagement program, it can actually increase the profits by 24,000 Rand per employee per year. And that was a few years back. So what do we need to do in learning? The first thing is you need to build a local but an international lined organization. So yes, you need to train what's necessary for your business within your market. But always keep your eyes open on what the guys are doing internationally, because we can learn from them. Instead of reinventing the wheel, see what they're doing. Rationale the clutter of your content. Is the training material that you've got relevant? Is it too long? Is it too little? Is it not specific? Does it not give an overview? Have a look at that content. And also learn to leverage different types of learning medium. YouTube is fantastic. TED Talks, there's e-learning that is coming out. So people learn visually and they also learn in different methods, and it's important that we cover all of those processes. And understand and drive a learning culture within your organization. People do want to learn additional skills. They're always willing to learn. We introduced 2 years back a nice thing which is called the corporate university, where we said, okay, fine, we have a product, come on, let's go onto the system, and now you need to learn. And it was everyone from payroll to sales to the cleaner, and said, here it is. It doesn't have any bearing whatsoever on your performance. It doesn't have any bearing on any reviews, but hey, it's an opportunity for you to learn more about the business and what they do. And let me tell you something, everyone tackled that head on because they could see on the system what their score was, and they personally didn't want to achieve less than an 80%. So it instilled this learning institution, almost like a corporate university. What we also need to look at is modernizing learning systems and measurement tools. You can have assignments online. You can have e-learning that is now managed and tracked and make sure that the person is doing their tests and assignments. And ultimately, it will lead to a place where we can say, well, what training has taken place? And what still needs to take place? How can I help the employee? And that will help us to create an experience platform, which is what our employees are looking for. As I mentioned before, they're not looking for a career, they're looking for an experience. If we look at the return on investment for learning and development, what it will do is it will help us to monitor the competency assessments, which will allow us then to use the analytics to show if the investment in training in specific areas is having an impact. Are we bridging the gaps? Are we increasing an employee's performance through the training that we've got? If we don't, we need to then redo our training. It is essential, once again, that we know what skills and competencies exist within the organization, and that the training department can tell you what skills and competencies exist. We also need to look at progression planning, which will be made very easy with the continued evaluation linked back to skills and competencies. You've got an individual with a skill and a competency set. I know what the job requires because that has got skills and competencies set. And I know that the training material that I have addresses certain skills and competencies. If I've got those 3 areas, I can link the evaluations with any job, with any person. And lastly, having an effective learning and development process will help us to track the learning and development of our employees. A system specifically will allow us to view a complete overview of the employee life cycle quickly and easily. It's important that we don't just look at this person and say, what training have they done? But we can look at a person and say, they have done this and the impact has been X, Y, Z. If we can't do that, then we have a lot of work to do on the talent management space. So those are the various processes. How do we bring it all together? How do we mobilize talent? It's one thing to bring the right people on board, but we don't want to put them in the wrong positions or just leave them there and hope that they find their own feet. We need to be able to mobilize them, to grow them, to work with their performance. And that ultimately is development, career development, succession planning. Another thing on the millennials, 53% of millennials said that if they learned new things or had access to professional development opportunities, they would most likely stay at their job. And everyone's saying the millennials will leave at the drop of a hat. But if they can see that their career, that there is professional development for them, they will stay. So how do we achieve that? What we need to do in HR is we need to understand what the individual needs and desires are. We need to know what the organization needs are. And we basically need to marry these needs up by using a personal development plan throughout the year. We need to gain insight into the individual through performance and career aspirations, and we need to know the business by understanding strategic competencies, planning key positions to take them not only into the short term, but into the long term. And how a big tool that companies are now starting to use is what they call the 9-box matrix. And this literally helps them to predict the talent mobility in divisions. I have a high flyer in this particular division. If I don't look at their career aspirations, I potentially could lose them to competitors. And guess what? That was number one challenge of talent management. I hire the right people, I train them, and then I lose them to competitors. Why? Because we probably left them alone. So we need to constantly work with them. If we look at what the return on investment could be, is we need to start using powerful analytical tools to assess the health of our organization. What are our bench strengths? What are our areas of risk? We've got 5 people in leadership. What happens if we lose any one of them? Is that a risk to the business? We need to be able to optimize these talent grids. We need to be able to start using these 9-box grids to be able to calibrate them, look at the last year's performance score of an employee, look at the potential, and plot our organization so that we can have a visual representation of what's happening with our talent. We can avoid hiring externally because now we got mobility inside. Now we can start promoting people. We can start upskilling them so that they can be prepared for future positions. And that ultimately will save on recruitment costs and engage with the employee. And we need to look at automating various succession scenarios. So should my sales manager be promoted into a sales director, is there someone that can take over that sales manager? Yes, there is. There's a very competent sales rep. Now, if I lose that sales rep, is there someone that can take over from him or her? No, there's not. Is that a gap in the business, or are salespeople a dime a dozen and they're easy to replace? So those are questions that these analytics can then show you. So not only is it saying, okay, fine, we're going to look up for succession plannings, but we also need to look down and what is the ripple effect that is going to be happening on the business, and then adapt those career plans accordingly. And interestingly enough, we all know what's the importance to employees? Compensation and benefits. You're never going to get away from that. But interestingly enough, there are 2 tied second places, largely because of the different generations that we're in. So you've got work-life balance, where people want to work from home and have the flexibility. And then you've also got this career and development aspirations and this living for an experience, which is coming from the millennial generation. I'm going to bring Burson up again because they had some interesting research where we are all familiar with the talent analytic maturity model, but they went one step further and they said, well, what percentage of the businesses now, because this model has been in place for at least 5 years, are at the top level where they are actually redeeming these predictive analytics. They're pulling talent management together. They're not looking at silos, and they're starting to report across businesses. And it's a scary statistic, but it's only 4%. Most of businesses are sitting at level 1, where we're reactive. Please, can you report here? Fine, I'll go ahead to Excel and I will report. Why is talent analytics so important? Well, it connects data and the understanding of data. So if we're in a position where we've got information, so I've got a system, I can see how many employees I have, I can see their ID number, I understand the employees that I've got and how many, and connect that to the business. So I've got that. I can go one step further and I can start looking at patterns. I can start looking at trends. Well, this was interesting. I hired someone from this avenue and everyone that's been that got up and running within 3 months. So now this gives me a bit of knowledge. I can connect my understanding even more. And ultimately, once we've got all of this information, we can start defining what the principles are. What is connecting all these dots? And that gives us the wisdom. And that is talent analytics. And what we always say is if you've just got information, you can easily tell the business what happened. Well, this person left the organization because ABC. When you've got knowledge, you can tell the organization what's happening. Before that person comes into the office, you know why they're leaving. But we want to be in a position of wisdom where we can go to the business and we can tell them what is going to happen. And that is why businesses are now having to push talent analytics. With the climate being what it is on an economic front, we have to be one step ahead of our competitors. We have to be one step ahead of everyone else. We need to know what's going to happen. Because if we know what's going to happen, we can probably solve it before it's even become a problem. So talent analytics, when we did research with HR departments, 6% of them said that they were excellent. But most felt, as much as 60%, felt that they were poor or they were behind on the analytics. And the purpose, once again, is it's a tool for managers to make better decisions. It brings HR and business data together, and it allows us to collectively review HR and the impact that our processes, that people has on the business goals. So this will allow us to monitor things easily. It's less time to prepare reports, because if we do look at a collected talent management approach, we shouldn't have to sit with an Excel spreadsheet from recruitment, Excel spreadsheet from performance, and collate it and come up with some fancy formulas to be able to give us the reports. So we'll be able to action faster and ultimately be able to communicate better across all business units. And second, lastly, in summary, we had one of the software companies actually did a research on the market capitalization of companies that had looked at software, had looked at automating certain processes in the organization. And they compared companies that had automated one application, for example, recruitment, versus another one that had done two, versus another one that possibly did learning, performance, and recruitment, and then looked at those that did everything in one. And it was quite a significant increase in the sense that people that really tackled talent management head on was 23.1% more of the market capitalization. So what does that mean? It means that my employer brand is stronger. It means that I get the talent. If I get the talent, it means that I recruit faster. If I recruit faster, it means that I can now then do the retention. And it has this whole ripple effect. We've got to be the ones that people want to work for. I will next month, as Nick has intimated, focus more on the technology side. But one of the things I do want to just inform you is if you are looking at the technology front and implementing certain key processes within talent management recruitment, just make sure of three things. One, that that system has the ability to grow with you. So don't just invest in a recruitment platform because that's your need now. Invest in a recruitment platform that, should you need to, can open up other modules down the line. The second thing that you need to focus on is you need to make sure that it is simple, because your managers are interacting with the system. So if the managers are interacting with the system, it must almost be like a cell phone. You buy a cell phone, you don't need a manual for it. It's kind of clear as to what you need to do. But if I have to sit with a manual against everything, it's going to be a problematic. And the third thing is you need to make sure that before you purchase anything, it's giving you the analytics, because that's why you're purchasing it in the first place, is it needs to give you certain analytics. So you start with the end in mind and you say, right, what analytics do you have? As Nick mentioned, I am the sales manager for Silversoft, so I can't just leave without talking a little bit. But just in summary, that if you are looking out for any particular software, please just give me a shout. I don't mind guiding you in what you need to look for, putting a business case together. I've been working with HR Smart for 10 years, who, as Nick has mentioned, recently has now become Deltek Talent. Software does handle all the components within the talent management space. And often I have people coming to me and saying, just show me how that works, because I may not be ready to look for technology, but I'm trying to get my head around how a platform can actually put everything into place, because that will then guide me in putting my paper processes down first, so that when I'm ready for a more advanced technology platform, I don't have to have such a big shift. My management team are comfortable with our processes already. And that is it for today. I don't know. Thank you very much for attending. I'm not sure if there are any questions.
Yes, Kat, I'll handle them. Maria's connections keeps dropping, so she's forwarded those through to me. Are you ready for them?
I am.
Okay, so the first one that came through, when implementing a unified solution over time, is there a best approach as to what process to implement and automate first?
Very good question. If I look at what most of the businesses are doing today, they generally are starting with the recruitment platform in place, generally because it doesn't have to impact everyone in the business. From there, they generally do performance management. Then they do training, and they finally end off with the 9-box grid, career mapping, and succession planning.
Okay. Second question, and obviously lots of our clients have the same issues, so here's a good one. How do you make decision makers or senior management realize the need for managing talent in the business? How do you convince them or explain the importance and benefits of talent management and how to harness them to the process?
It's everyone's problem, hey? Yeah, I find an organization's decision to start managing their talent results from one of two reasons. One, it's anxiety about a deteriorating situation, or it's a desire to do better. So when you look at anxiety, it stems from resignations of key players. And this usually happens after a manager has experienced personally the loss of a promising employee and almost perceives it as a personal abandonment. So often frustration, which results from the question of how could I have handled it difficult or differently, leads to action. In such a case, the prevailing approach to argue the importance of talent management is then based on what we've gone through now, which is the return on investment. Replacing a talent that has decided to leave involves higher costs and other implications than replacing other employees. So mainly because the resignation of talent involves the loss of vital knowledge. And this loss is particularly evident in cases of employees who maintain contact with customers such as sales, implementation, customer support staff, or others whom the customer depends. I mean, there was a recent study in Israel where they said that the minimal calculation equates to that of half a year's salary. So we need to then plan to reduce talent turnover, even to some degree will impact return on investment. And the second motive, as I mentioned, which is the desire to do better, is the desire to duplicate a successful sales rep or to understand that set of skills that would help a person succeed in the future. So developing talent enables the business to produce proper successes for key positions, makes it possible for the company to realize its business objectives. So we in HR should match up the talent management plan to the company's business strategy as the new methodology we discussed for talent management. And then managers who are convinced of the added value of such a process will approve it a lot more easily. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, and I think just to jump in there as well, exactly what Kathryn's covered today, being able to demonstrate return on investment. So where they have either spent money on a system or not spent money on a system, but you're actually doing aspects of talent management in your business, if you can measure against time. So these were the results we had before we started doing this. These are the results we've got after doing it, and show them reports. Decision makers, senior management, they tend to look at numbers and facts and figures. So if you can report on that, then that's certainly going to help you win the battle. And then last question that I've got is it possible to manage talent in a small organization where the number of employees is less than 100, and if so, how?
Surely, it definitely is possible and actually advisable to manage talent in a small organization. A small organization faces challenges that are similar to those of your large ones, such as the need for succession planning, knowing who their bench players are, responding to situations when these people leave the organization, often because of limited opportunities for growth and promotion. And in a small organization, when talent leaves, it exposes almost a greater risk than a larger one, because the volume of activity supported by that person was so much higher. So the damage that could be caused to the organization by not maximizing employee potential, or even the wrong placement of an employee or your top talent quitting, represents a very high risk factor to a small organization. And I think the main difference between a small and a large organization is in the implementation of the plan and its adjustment to the size of the organization. So you need to look at a talent management plan that usually includes leaner processes based on best practices, making it simpler, as well as restricting possibly the mapping process to enable a quick course of action that meets the need of the organization. I do have one question as well, which has just popped up, which is to say I'd like to arrange the session for the senior managers in my organization. Is it possible? Absolutely. I will connect with you after the webinar and we can set a time and a plan going forward. Nick, I don't know if there are any other questions that have popped up.
No, none that have come through to me.
Perfect. Once again, thank you everyone for attending the session. I will be sending an email out. If you would like to attend the breakfast, please let me know. If you would like a recording as well, I'd be happy to send this through to you. Have a fantastic day, and I look forward to seeing you next month with the next installment. Goodbye, everyone.